can say to a client, are you ready to try this? It could be open mic night if it's a singer or a networking event or whatever it is. Are you ready to try this? And my client might say, ooh, I don't think so. But if I say, is SO ready to try this? Almost always they're like, oh yeah, SO definitely wants to do that. That kind of thing. Like, it's just obvious and clear and easy to know what the right choices are when a person who doesn't have all your baggage is making the decision.
Welcome to Two Coaches, One Life,
where we're on a mission to ignite confidence, health, and joy to make the most of this life.
My name is Lenore Shepherd, a board-certified health and wellness coach.
And I'm Judy Fine, a vocal performance and confidence coach. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Two Coaches, One Life. Today, we're going to be talking about discovering your twin flame.
Yes, a really exciting topic that we hope you will find also revelatory. And Judy told me her story about it. I said, this is something we got to talk about. So thank you for joining us today. And so why don't we just sort of jump right in? Miss Judy, can you tell us a little bit about your process of both? Well, let's sort of start out for folks, sort of what the definition is of twin flame, and then secondly, how you discovered yours.
Yes, I would love to. Twin flame is most commonly used to refer to your soulmate. I think that other person out in the world, that one person that you're meant for, which isn't necessarily something I subscribe to. The idea that there's only one other person I'm supposed to be in the world doesn't really sort of match how life feels to me. But I get the concept of that perfect person for you to fall in love with. But when I refer to twin flame, it's a person inside you for you to fall in love with in a very similar way, but a side of yourself that you absolutely fall in love with. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I like that idea. That's part of you because I feel like that's so much of our journey here is falling in love with ourselves, which always sounds like sort of strange, but what it makes me think about unconditional love. And I don't know, it makes me also think of when my mother passed. We were very close, and I sort of felt that she was one of my soulmates. And I thought, that sense of unconditional love is gone. And then some other voice said, no, you find it in yourself. And I was like, oh, wow, I never thought about that really, So it seems a little bit what you're saying also is kind of resurrecting that and making friends with it.
Yeah, 100%. And like in any well-balanced, healthy relationship, there's this give and take. So it's not that the you that you're familiar with now is somehow wrong and you need your twin flame to sort of come in. But there's sort of times when when it's appropriate for you to take the reins in your life. And there are times when you need this life partner of yours to kind of take the reins. And that's how you use it as a tool in your life, even though I haven't really said exactly what it is yet.
Before we dive in, can I ask, because, and I think I remember when you and I talked about this many moons ago, however long that was, that it feels like it's one's higher self, right? I always think about that, like getting wisdom from that part of our soul that is eternal and is the wisest part of us and is always there for our guidance. And when we can tune into it within our intuition, then we can get so much information. So is that a little bit along the lines?
It's similar to that. I don't really define it that way, but many people do. And I don't tell other people how to define it. So it's sort of what makes sense for you. There were times in my life when the words higher power felt separate and better than me, like body bad, higher power good kind of thing. And so I personally don't use that language anymore. And that's just this part of my own journey. It's not really something I put on anybody else. But so I prefer to think of it as, I have multiple personalities inside of me and they're all wise, including this one that sometimes has some baggage. And it's a question of when I need a certain side of myself, I can call that side of myself up. So yes, higher power works for lots of people. It's just not how I personally use it.
Thank you for sharing that. And what you're talking about directly speaks to internal family systems, which is all the different parts of us, our adolescent, the
Mm.
firefighter. It's a beautiful form of integrating all of the different parts of us that need our reflection and need our help and need for us to sort of revisit to see how it's impacting where we are in our current life situation, right? So
Yeah,
anyway, just saying what
exactly.
what you're talking about, you must have intuitively known that there's these parts of you inside that you can both refer to and be guided by.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of at certain times I need a certain side more. So there have been times in my life I needed to connect with the little kid in me. And there are different times I needed to do that. And there's like one when I was like in grade school, and then there's one when I was, in middle school. And I can picture them. And I've had like convened with them. I've journaled with them at different times.
Mm.
That's not currently where I am, but when I need that part of my life just needs some help, I can kind of call on one of those people, sit down and have a coffee with them.
Hmm. And what happens when you do that?
Um, y Usually some crying. Um, so what happens and the twin flame, to me, these are not all twin flames. The twin flame specifically is that person that you really wanna be and your heart really wants to be, and that you probably would have become had, life's conditioning and challenges and maybe trauma or whatever not sent you in a different direction. So the twin flame is like the partner, the co-parents
Mm.
of the other personalities, so to speak. So when you meet um, that person is someone. So mine's called SO. I call her SO. She's almost like someone who grew up in a parallel universe, but she grew up with a sense of self and
Mm.
self belief, and she wasn't afraid to do the things that I was afraid to do. And you know, uh, it, for anyone who watched the first episode of the show, she definitely did not marry someone in her 20s because she didn't want to hurt his feelings by saying no, for example. Um, and what happens is when I'm trying to change behaviors and sort of transform my life, if I go into a situation and I say, when this thing happens, I'm going to try to remember to respond this way. And if this happens, I'm going to try to remember to respond that way. And I want to remember to walk this way. And I want to remind myself that I feel this way. All these separate things. Separately, those things can be challenging to sort of keep track of and try to make those changes. But when I channel SO, she just is that way. And I don't have to think about what changes I want to do because I'm just being a side of myself. I don't know if I said that in a way that makes sense, but
I think so. I think you're really talking about presence and just not being so, not the words, not really caught up, but being able to sort of to distill what is most true in this present moment. What do I need to focus on and how is it going to help me just really tune into what my higher self, what my twin flame is trying to tell me? Is that sort of an accurate
yeah.
reflection?
Yeah, and I've worked with people who it's not something that we do in a single session. It sort of takes time to flesh this person out, but when we get to a place where this person is named and almost has like a bio, I can say to a client, are you ready to try this? It could be open mic night if it's a singer or a networking event or whatever it is. Are you ready to try this? And my client might say, ooh, I don't think so. But if I say, is SO ready to try this? Almost always they're like, oh yeah, SO definitely wants to do that. That kind of thing. Like it's just obvious and clear and easy to know what the right choices are when a person who doesn't have all your baggage is making the decision.
It's interesting because I think this is a bit of a parallel that comes up when I'm working with clients, when people start to pause and reflect how trauma has impacted, their sensibilities, their way of looking at life, their relationships, their ability to be present with themselves, their own self-dialogue, that if this hadn't happened, who would I be? And that's sort of an eternal question, right?
Yeah.
So this is a beautiful sense of encouragement of, well, you have a choice though. And that's the thing. It's one of the things that I ask my clients too is, do you feel that you have a choice in terms of how you're feeling? Because if we don't
Right.
feel we have a choice. We are at the whim of what our emotions are dictating for us, you know? So I love
Absolutely.
this concept because it's really inviting, be in the now. And it reminds me of, what Eleanor Roosevelt said, do one thing that scares you every day, right? Living outside of your comfort
Yes.
zone, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how old were you and where were you when you discovered, or maybe when SO manifested herself for you?
Yeah, because the concept of sort of figuring out who you really are and what you really want is not new to me, for me personally or in my coaching. But SO came about in 2021. So we were still kind of dealing with COVID. And my husband and I were transitioning away from Florida. And we landed in Maine and we were house hunting during the world's worst time to be house hunting. There was like no inventory and super high prices. Um, and I was going through a little bit of a mourning stage because we had hopped into an RV for a year and we decided to leave the RV. And I was kind of grieving that, even though I also wanted to leave. Menopause was kicking my butt.
Oh,
I didn't have medical help. I was silly. I own that piece. I didn't really have medical help because my insurance was still in Florida and everybody was out of network. And I was just like, I can do this myself, which was a really bad choice. But,
that's
um,
we
I,
try and do sometimes, muscle through the pain. Yeah.
yeah, I got so
Wow.
depressed and just physical problems. And I felt so old. I felt expired. I felt like I wasn't
Mm.
relevant anymore. And I had a singing client online who was an aerialist in a circus, a family circus. And the same little girl who used to like sing pop tunes and into her hairbrush in her bedroom when I was little, sort of came up in my practice sessions, except now I was an adult singing in a circus, which is not a thing. There are no rock bands in circuses, but I was doing it and I could see, the circular benches, whatever. And I was part of this whole act in this circus in these fantasies when I was practicing. And I would not tell anybody at the time that I was doing this. It felt completely silly, but it made me feel so good.
Mm.
And SO kind of came out of that because what I realized is SO was this character that I was pretending to be when I was practicing. And she's my age, but she still felt sexy and relevant. And she was still, I'm going to start a new band. And if I want to change the lyrics, I'm going to change the lyrics. And I don't care how you feel about it. And she just was being her unapologetically. And once I caught on to how good she made me feel, I named her. I named her SO just because my last name is Fine and I was being silly. But
So fun.
really, but I realized I could channel her in times when it wasn't about singing or trying to do something. It was just I was feeling crappy and I didn't want to, and I would just try to channel SO and sort of joke about things. And um, so that I mean, I would say SO kind of saved me from that period of time. It was awful. It was like one of the worst years of my adult life.
Mm.
And then I just had a client that I had been working with and SO worked for me. So I tried it with her and it just became this thing that's now a staple of my coaching.
Wow. That's a really powerful story, and sometimes, what's born from the most powerful place of grief and pain is something
Mhm.
that, a bigger version, a more powerful, more beautiful version of ourselves that we could never have imagined, had we not been there.
100%, 100%. And it feels so natural to me now to
Mm.
to help other people think this way, but also just to bring her in. So I went to networking events when I first moved to Western Mass, and I remember the first one. I like looked in the door, and there's all these people mingling and talking like they've been friends forever, and I don't know anybody, and I'm there alone. And I was like, Judy was like, I think I left the water running. It's time to go home. But then SO kind of, without really thinking anymore, she kind of comes to me and all of a sudden, I'm walking around the room like, "Hi, I'm Judy. I'm a confidence coach for women," and just introducing myself to people. I still had to go home and like take a nap afterwards because that's Judy was exhausted. But
Yeah.
the point is, if you have a difficult conversation, you want to have someone you're going to go on a job interview, anything. you can channel the side of you and choose to be the person you really want to be. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
I love that you said choose the person you want to be, because I feel that I use a lot of that in my coaching with people of
Mm-hmm.
that you have a choice in life. There are things that are in our control, things that are not in our control. One of the sort of the first things I have folks do who have issues with around anxiety and wanting to build up their stress resilience is write down everything you feel you have a sense of control over, and then the things that you don't, right? So that people can sort of see, oh, and looking at why am I trying to bend something that's not going to bend? Let me focus on what are the things that I can. And that brings up that sense of, confidence and can do. And what you're also reminding me of, and I don't know if it was, gosh, I'm trying to remember who the author was talking about this, but the superwoman pose, standing,
Yes.
akimbo with,
Power pose. Yeah.
power pose, right? Which I do
Mm-hmm.
before an interview. And just what
Yep.
you're actually saying is channeling that inner strength, that inner core, that
Yep.
of course I can do this. I have
It
this better
works.
than anyone, but it's funny because for me, how I use it is with folks is also using their body, right? Is like finding that
Mm-hmm.
inner core of confidence, and then just when you're out
Yep.
there, because we know what we can do when we don't have that negative little voice that likes to poke at us, right?
Yes. Yes, we do. And our brain is always taking inventory of what our body's doing. So this is like
Mm,
a tenet of performance anxiety coaching. You if you're holding your body a certain way, like you're really scared, you're about to go on stage or whatever, and you're trying to tell your brain everything's going to be all right, your lyrics, your brain's going to be like, what, shut up, look how you're holding yourselves, we're clearly terrified here. So you can't really talk your brain out of that stuff except for by changing how you hold your body, because then when your brain takes inventory of what's going on in your body, it has a sense that you're feeling okay and we're not really in danger.
mm. Wow, I love that. There's just so many things that it's reminiscent of both in the therapeutic practice, but also just in sort of practical terms of how you stand, how you hold yourself, where you feel
Mhm.
your sense of power, where your voice is coming from, and what sense of command do you feel like you have when you're out in the world, right? And what are you projecting, right? What are you sort of emitting out there?
Yeah.
It's such a delightful topic because it opens so many different channels. So have you found with your clients that once they're able to access this, I guess, twin flame, this really very potent, I guess, strong part of themselves that obviously builds their confidence, but also their performance also starts to improve?
100%. 100%. I have occasionally worked with people who are uncomfortable with the concept of even coming up with a twin flame, and there's something deeper there, and I'm not entirely sure. You're the licensed therapist. I'm not, so I don't go to those depths. If it doesn't work, we try something else. But for the most part, people love it. It makes them feel it's fun, and it makes them
Yeah.
feel, I don't know, it's like exciting and fun, and it's almost like a joke, except it's a joke that works. So, people can say, like I had a client recently who sort of graduated from artist development coaching, and her twin flame, she called her Luna. And she loved talking about Luna and what Luna would drink and how Luna would dress and all of that. And when she wants to be the best version of herself when she's performing, she channels Luna and has a blast. It's
Mm,
fun. It makes working on confidence fun. I don't know how many
yeah.
times I can say fun in one sentence, but it's
Why
fun, fun,
not?
fun, fun.
Joy, that's what we're trying to access. And the more that you can, I have on my refrigerator, life is too important to be taken seriously, Oscar Wilde. I was like, yes, I agree with that. I have a lot of,
Perfect.
lot of quotes, but, I love that when we step outside of ourselves and just look at, gosh, how do I make this something accessible? Think about it. You're not going to do things for yourself if they feel laborious and it feels like, oh, there's a part of myself that just, I have to really resurrect this sense of going to do it. But if it's fun and it's liberating, one of the things that I'm going to keep coming back to Martha Beck, because I love her, that she talks about when we can achieve a sense of enlightenment, there's freedom. right? That's that sense of freedom, of that openness and that spaciousness of what is possible in us. So that's sort of what, I sort of look at this flower that's opening, to what the fruitful possibilities are. I don't know. It seems like.
It makes it a game that you enjoy playing, as opposed to like, why can't I be more disciplined? Or, why am I so afraid to talk? Like we just sort of get down on ourselves. I don't know what that voice was, but that's the voice of me getting down on myself.
Yeah.
But
it's funny.
It just makes it fun.
But that's funny though. It's impersonating what that feels like, that like internalized, like sort of within the lungs, almost saying no, as opposed
What's
to
the
like
Winnie the Pooh character?
Eeyore?
Is it Eeyore? Yeah. Okay. That's what I feel like. It's like Eeyore energy.
I know. We just boost ourselves up. It's funny because I know I mentioned this to you before we hopped on, but when you talked about, the concept of channeling that, I'd heard also recently, and this is not a new concept, but of naming your inner critic. And I love that because that tends to sort of lessen the intensity. So I've named my inner critic Grump. I'm like, oh, here's Grump. She can be grumpy. She can just be Grump, hump of a grump, whatever it is. It's a hump of a grump coming back. And then I can say, oh, yeah, that's right. Let me come back to what is. Let me come back to what I really know, So it seems like it's a process of like coming back and, channeling. So, I think this is a very rich topic, and I think it's something that we will be sort of referencing, for future topics, because there's so much magic in this. And really what we're trying to, inspire, ignite is how do we get the most sense of joy, the most sense of freedom, the most sense of confidence in this life, right? And this is one of the ways, that self-talk. So, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to sort of leave folks with in terms of helping them connect to their twin flame?
Yeah, there are different ways you can sort of find that person, but I would say, don't be, if words like silly or unrealistic pop up, or you feel like you're just making stuff up or something, like just don't think too much about it. I once had a client who has said, if you could write yourself into any fictional story, what would you be doing? And at first she didn't want to answer because it felt silly, but finally she said, I'd probably be down in like South America, fighting the cartels or something, right? So it seems sort of far-fetched and silly, but when we boiled it down to the things that she wanted to feel, which was like she was being courageous, like she was doing something good in the world. There were specific feelings she wanted that made it really clear to us what her heart wants to feel now. So there really is no too silly, because your brain will go, even if it seems extreme, it's going to go where your heart leads it.
That's beautiful. Your brain is going to go. Yes, I love that. Gosh, I talk about that so much, of leading with the heart, getting out of the egoic, fear-based mind. I think it was Wayne Dyer, who I love, that looked at fear, false evidence appearing real, or false ego appearing real, which I love, and we can get away from that. Then we can look at what the possibilities are. So thank you. I think this has been a lovely and rich discussion. So
thank you for wanting to talk about it. 'Cause it's fun.
Absolutely. No, I'd only encountered twin flames sort of more from the spiritual concept, of someone that you meet, that, there's that magnetic attraction, sort of that, that mirror soul, who's mirroring you, but who also pushes you in ways that are really hard. And you're having to deepen who you are to think and do better and be better, but in a way that can be painful. But then there is that transcendence, that comes at the end. Right?
I mean, that's pretty similar to a twin flame inside of you.
Yes.
I don't know about painful, but the pushing and stretching for sure.
Yeah. I guess I think of like, that's where the growth is, but.
Yeah. God, we're huge.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, if anybody out there has a thought about a twin flame story, or, tell us what you think about it. Even if you think it's silly, please share. We want to hear.
The sillier, the better.
So 2coaches1life.com is our website. Sign up for our email list. Until next time.
Bye-bye.